Have you just finished high school and are uncertain of what to study next year at university? Or are you already in the system, electing your new subjects for the next semester and are still quite confused with so many to choose from? Well, I got one simple word for you: philosophy. Sure, you're probably wondering, why would I study philosophy? What use could that possibly have for me or for the world we're living in when I graduate? We've spoken to PhD students, a range of lecturers in that department, and also people from the admin. So I would like to present to you the Philosophy documentary. What was it that first drew you to the topic of philosophy?
Well, I started university studying science and got disillusioned with it because of its reductionism, and thought there were more important problems associated with society. So I moved to economics and politics. And having studied science, I realised that a lot of what was passed as science, economic science, was pseudoscience. So that raises all the questions about, what is genuine knowledge, and how should society be organised? All those sort of questions that weren't being properly answered by politics departments, because they just didn't think deeply enough about, what are humans. So that's what led me to eventually decide I had no alternative but to start a philosophy degree.
Well, I came here as a mature age student, interested in finding out about the obesity crisis. And I was planning on studying sociology because I thought it was a social problem fundamentally. And I tried all sorts of different subjects in my first year, in media, social sciences, the arts, what have you. And then it was then that I got a real sense in which it was the philosophy people, or was the philosophy discipline, where I could really find out what was happening, more generally. And I could look at a whole bunch of different disciplines as well, and not just be restricted to one method or one discipline.
I think it was that room. I think it was the space to ask bigger questions, the questions that you can't just ask your teacher, oh, what's the meaning of life, sir? And then they'll give you an answer. It's kind of just a place to ponder that sort of thing and have a discussion about that, and draw from someone else's experience and try and inform your own line of questioning.
Actually, it was something pretty stupid. It was more fun than chess. It was more fun than other things I was doing. I'd been doing things with my life, and I thought it's time to do something else. I've studied a little bit of philosophy when I was at Teachers College. It was the most interesting thing I'd ever studied anywhere. I'd done other things with my life, and I thought, okay, time to stop doing things that don't mean anything to me. I'll do something that's fun. So I took up philosophy, studying philosophy at university as a mature age student. I loved it, and then after I'd been studying philosophy for a few years, I realised it wasn't just fun, it actually mattered. It actually meant something.
Explain to us how philosophy is very much required in society today.
Well, I would say that there's no area of life to which it's irrelevant, which it doesn't help, because philosophy really just forces you to ask fundamental questions.
Well, every society is based on philosophical assumptions. You can see this, if you look at the history of civilizations, you can see how in the axial age certain assumptions were laid down and civilizations built upon them. The problem at present is that the assumptions that we've inherited are fundamentally defective, and we can see that with the global ecological crisis and our inability to deal with the problem.
There's a tendency to think that philosophy is just about ordering arguments, or to ask questions that are sort of irrelevant today. It's sort of like, are you sure you're in reality though? So it's been disconnected to some extent from pragmatic concerns. People don't think that philosophy is important in understanding ourselves as part of the world. It's actually asking serious questions about what are the capacities for humans, what kind of life is a good life, really. And I think those fundamental questions today, especially, for me, the environmental crisis and the fact that we're destroying the planet is something that's really important, it's the most important issue and the one from which every other issue should be viewed. that really asks questions like, what life should we be living?
You can't understand really anything just by learning technical concepts about it. You can understand a lot about public transport, let's say, anything, right? But then you come to learn that public transport has to be considered as a public good, as something that belongs to everybody in a sense, right? And then you start to think, well, how did people come to the idea of things that belong to everybody, like roads, public transport, the air, water? These are all, at bottom, these are all ideas, and they all relate to a whole range of ideas about what we're entitled to, what we have rights to, what we need, and so forth. So underlying all of our everyday activities and assumptions, there are philosophical ideas. You just have to look a little deeper, and there they are.
Philosophy is seen by some as a pointless waste of time where all people do is just sit around all day and thinking. What do you say to those remarks?
I'd say that's one of the most important parts of life. Sitting around and talking with people that you're close to and thinking about the world, because it really informs what you do when you're in the world.
When they say that it's a waste of time, they're assuming that there's a reason for doing things, which is a philosophical idea. Are they just going to accept the ideas that they've inherited, or are they going to reflect upon, what they should be aiming at in life? If they're going to do that, then they're doing philosophy.
I guess the question is, why is asking fundamental questions a waste of time? I mean, some people would say that this is one of the things that makes us human, that we can be self-reflexive.
I think that we have been able to develop very, very far and achieve a lot through thinking and abstract thinking, and I think that discounting it by saying that it's a waste of time is honestly disrespectful of that progress. And I think that the people who think that really don't see the functions behind advancements that we have in technology and in, again, the legal system and the economy and such. And I think that thinking is the difference between us acting through instinct and acting wisely.
Well, theory and practice go together, and none of us do anything without theorising about it to some extent. That's the condition of being a self-conscious human being. But a lot of people in our society regard theory as being separate from practice and not as important. And they regard people who theorise about the world as not really being part of the world, or not being practically engaged with the world. It's being somehow removed from it and theorising about things that have no relevance to the world. But if you look at the whole history of humanity, it's everything we do today, everything we have, all of our cities, our engineering, our science, our art, our culture, these are have all been influenced by philosophical theories over centuries. It's just that people who don't study philosophy aren't aware of the theories that underpin their civilization.
What is more important than that? Understanding how we're living and how we're living together, and is it fair to everyone? Do we have the best society we could? How could we make society better? What would that mean? Whose perspective are we looking at this from? I guess I don't know what to say to someone who would say that was a waste of time.
Philosophy is such a diverse subject, ranging from Eastern philosophers to the likes of Confucius, to Western Greek philosophers to the likes of Plato and Aristotle. Which particular part of philosophy interests you the most?
Well, I think that you have to, as a Westerner, you have to be interested in Western philosophy, because it's only through understanding the history of that you can understand our present culture. But I think to properly understand it, you need some comparison, some different perspective, and that's provided by studying Eastern philosophy.
Well, I'm a dialectician, if that makes sense. I look at philosophy from a dialectical perspective. That is, I look at reality as being sort of held together by the tension between opposing ideas, opposing forces. So rather than being on one side or the other a lot of these debates, I'm always trying to synthesize them into a new question or a new idea. I see the relationships between these opposing views. For instance, Western philosophy has a view of progress that it's sort of this linear movement continually going up. And it argues that to be enlightened means that you have to actively seek enlightenment through education and improvement and all these sorts of things. Whereas Eastern philosophy is all about seeking enlightenment through avoiding all this stuff, quietening your mind, trying to get rid of all of these abstractions and the theories and ideas, and trying to see reality for itself beneath all of this. And Eastern philosophy is more of a cyclical process as well. But the reality is that, the two of them really complement each other. We have these cyclic ideas of reality. We have this view that, we have this need to be able to quieten our minds and get away from all of the busyness and mess that's going on. But we also have this need to engage and try to improve the world and transform it in various ways.
What notable philosopher would you say you admire, and what is your favourite quote by him or her?
I would have to say Sam Harris. I can't think of a great quote right now. However, something that has been on my mind recently is that there's a philosopher named Donald Hoffman who said that belief is essentially limiting to our experience. And I think that's something that could really be carried forward into the future, especially in the field of science, because I think that the issue that we see in a lot of scientists or in the scientific field is that there is a sort of self-reifying practice even, where testing sort of tests for itself and then results become tampered in that way. And I think belief is a big part of that. And I think if we really want to draw a distinction between science and religion, there shouldn't be dogmatic thought like that.
Well, I'm a big fan of my colleague Aaron Gare. I'm sort of known as a major interpreter of Gare.
Well, I admire a hell of a lot of them. So perhaps a recent one is Whitehead, who characterised philosophy as an attitude of mind towards doctrines ignorantly entertained. I think that's a really good definition.
I would say, I guess, the person that I admired most is Mary Wollstonecraft. Now, when I say I admire her, I'm not sure I particularly want to be a friend of hers. Like many philosophers, she was pretty high maintenance, Nietzsche for sure, super high maintenance.
Nietzsche saying that philosophers are physicians of culture. I think that's a good way of characterising what philosophers are.
We're also, Garen and I are both influenced as process philosophers by Alfred North Whitehead, a early 20th century philosopher. And one of the quotes from him that I use regularly is the idea that philosophy is the journey towards the greater generalities. And that is what he's saying there is that the study of philosophy allows you to transcend the particularities of the world and see yourself as being part of bigger and bigger ideas, bigger and bigger domains, and start to be able to theorise more generally about the nature of the world.
Why is philosophy such a vital unit in university?
Well, any student who's bright will start reflecting upon the assumptions of their discipline, and to do that properly they need to get into philosophy. They'll be doing philosophy anyway, but they'll be doing it badly unless they engage with philosophers.
Because you can carry it with you for the rest of your life. Whatever you learn in philosophy classes will not date.
All the various disciplines that we have in universities are there to inform the philosophical questions and to help us to develop a love for wisdom. So a university without philosophy, without a philosophy department, is a completely rudderless university. It's doing a lot of stuff, but it doesn't ask why.
Philosophy enables you to put all the different disciplines in perspective in relationship to each other. It also provides you with the means to think more clearly, creatively and so on, and to be able to apply ideas to new situations. So if you think about how the world's constantly changing, unless you've got that capacity, your knowledge is going to be obsolete in a few years.
So you learn to ask penetrating questions of yourself and others. And so that information or that style of thinking never dates. And it also means that you're never bored.
If you could say in a single sentence to anybody finishing secondary college or selecting a university bachelor why you should enrol in philosophy, what would it be?
Don't sell your education short.
It would be that you don't know what you don't know yet, and I think philosophy is the place to find out what that is.
Because even big business today is saying how important things like critical thinking, teamwork and creativity are.
Thinking about philosophical issues, deep thinking, is actually thinking about what gives our lives meaning.
So how could philosophy be applied with decision making in the workplace?
Well, there are a number of answers there. One is just the personal payoffs, but I would say that particularly in the climate we are about to enter, that increasingly employers are recognizing the value of someone who has philosophical training and someone who's capable of taking a philosophical approach to problems and situations. So there's a real training in intellectual agility that accompanies the study of philosophy.
One thing about philosophy, or one thing that I think about philosophy, is about dialogue. So it's about getting people together and working out things, coordinating things together. Often when you have workplaces, you have people at the top who are regulating things and telling people at the bottom where to go or what to do. And there becomes a division between the people that are making decisions and then the people that essentially become their limbs.
I would say that the skills of philosophy students are vital in the success of many businesses. You see many of the successful businesses coming out of Silicon Valley being started up by philosophy graduates, making millions of dollars, but I also think there's a danger in philosophy of being drawn in to a culture which ends up sort of corrupting you in some ways. So I think the skills are very useful for business and can help your business, but you need to also respect philosophy graduates having a mind of their own and taking a critical perspective and contributing to your business through that side of it as well.
If philosophy is about dialogue and working things out together and realising that you're part of a team or a group of people who have shared goals, then philosophy can be useful in bringing everyone together. If we realise that, get everyone together to work things out collectively, and then hopefully once you start doing that, other things start becoming important, like the fact that it's not very team-like if a few people are getting paid exorbitant wages.
Would you say philosophy gives you enlightenment and a better understanding of the society we live in?
Oh yeah, philosophy does that above economics, politics and sociology. In fact, you look at all the different works in philosophy, sociology, economics, they're all based on ideas from philosophers. But as I said, often they're outmoded ideas that need rethinking. So yeah, philosophy is, if you really want to understand society, you need to understand philosophy.
I think it definitely gives me a better understanding of the society we live in. I don't necessarily think that it is directly conducive to enlightenment. I think that enlightenment is definitely a personal journey and it takes personal experience to get to certain enlightened states, but philosophy is definitely a very powerful stepping stone.
Oh, well, that's a no-brainer. Of course it does. It's the path to enlightenment. Philosophy is about taking the time. Why philosophy is so important is because, particularly today, is because we live in a world where everyone wants to keep busy. And most people are keeping busy to distract themselves from the huge crises we're now facing. In fact, I think a lot of people are grieving over the fact that this civilization, or this party we've been having, is actually over. Philosophy is the discipline that actually allows you to stop and reflect on what's going on and then try to develop some sort of understanding of what's going on. And unless at some stage in your life you do that, you'll continually wander around in confusion.
Well, what an exciting unit that is. I certainly thought so when I first enrolled in philosophy a couple of years ago. I couldn't believe the amount of information I learnt from the likes of Confucius, Socrates, or Plato, all such amazing people. And it gives you a real insight of how the world turns and the attitudes of people. If you'd like to learn more about enrolling in philosophy, you can always contact your local uni and speak to the philosophy department. Together, we can change the world.